Humanity faces the test. Dr. Emily Brooks leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with questions and theories. The message from the council was clear. Humanity had 30 days to prepare for the threshold, the ultimate test. But what did it really mean? What would this test involve? And why had the council given Earth only a month to prepare instead of the usual year? The council's cryptic message wasn't the only thing that had Emily on edge. For the past 3 years, she had watched as various alien species tried and failed at the threshold. She had studied their psychology, their behaviors, and their responses to the unknown. Some species had overthought the challenge, spending decades creating complex systems to solve problems. Others had relied on their physical strength or military prowess. None had succeeded. Each failure seemed to break their spirits, leaving them scattered, defeated, and broken beyond repair. What would humanity face? What would the council require? The uncertainty gnawed at her. Her thoughts were interrupted by Tom's voice. "Dr. Brooks, are you okay? You've been staring at that screen for hours." Emily blinked and sighed, rubbing her temples. "Sorry, Tom. It's just that I don't know if we're ready for this. No one's ever passed the threshold. It's impossible." "Well, maybe not impossible for us," Tom said with a half-smile. "You always say humans are different. We don't think the same way the other species do. Maybe that's our advantage." She couldn't help but smile at his optimism. "You're right. Maybe that's the key. We don't have the best technology. We don't have the longest history. But we've got something they don't. We've got resilience. We've got curiosity. And we have an endless ability to adapt. It's not about having the right answer. It's about finding a way to make it work when everything else fails." Tom nodded. "Exactly. That's why I believe we can do this. We're not like the others. We don't give up." Emily stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the alien embassy shimmering in the sunlight. The embassy's crystal walls seemed to pulse with an ethereal glow, and the ships from the council hovered above it, casting long, jagged shadows across the earth below. They had been here for years now, watching, waiting, observing. They had seen humanity's greatest achievements, from space exploration to deep scientific discoveries. Yet they had never seen anything quite like this, a species on the brink of its greatest challenge. "Do you think the aliens believe in us?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tom hesitated before responding. "I don't know, but I think we might have something they didn't expect. We're unpredictable. We don't follow the rules, and that might be exactly what we need." The room grew quiet as Emily processed his words. The council had always seen themselves as the gatekeepers of the galaxy, the ones who decided who was worthy of joining the galactic community. But humanity didn't fit their mold. They didn't conform to expectations, didn't play by the rules. That, perhaps, was the very thing that made humans so unique. As Emily turned back to her desk, she began to pull up files on other species that had failed the test. Each file was a sobering reminder of what was at stake. The Centurions, a race of advanced beings with crystalline bodies, had spent centuries preparing for the threshold, building quantum computers and training their best minds to solve its puzzles. And yet, they had failed. The Arcturians, a fierce warrior species, had dedicated entire generations to mastering combat and strategy. They, too, had failed. Then there were the peaceful, philosophical races who had sought to solve the test through understanding and harmony, only to fall short as well. Emily's eyes narrowed as she skimmed through the data. One common thread ran through all their failures. They had approached the test with an air of certainty. They believed that logic, technology, or strength would lead them to victory. But no one had thought to consider the possibility that the test itself was something completely different, something that couldn't be solved by brute force or high intelligence. She tapped a finger against the screen, deep in thought. Could it be that the council wasn't testing strength or intelligence? Could the threshold be something that required human qualities, traits that no other species possessed in the same way? Creativity, adaptability, humor, and the ability to think outside the box. A sudden realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. Maybe that's exactly what the council was expecting from humanity. They wanted to see how humans would approach the unknown, not with arrogance or blind confidence, but with the kind of curiosity and resourcefulness that defined them as a species. Emily's pulse quickened. She knew what she had to do. Humanity couldn't prepare for the test in the same way other species had. They couldn't build bigger machines or train harder. Instead, they had to approach the threshold in their own unique way. They had to think differently. "Tom," Emily called, turning to her assistant. "I think I've figured it out. The test isn't about following the rules. It's about breaking them. It's about showing the council that we can think beyond what they expect. We can't be afraid to fail, because that's what sets us apart from the others. Failure doesn't break us. It drives us to keep going, to find a new solution." Tom looked at her, his eyes lighting up. "You're saying we just need to be ourselves?" "Exactly," Emily said, a smile creeping across her face. "We need to show them that we don't need all their advanced technology or their centuries of training. We just need to be human. And that's what they don't understand." Just as she said that, a new message appeared on her screen. It was from the president. "Dr. Brooks," the message read, "I want to meet with you. We need to discuss a new strategy. You're right. We can't prepare like everyone else. We need a new plan. Meet me in an hour." Emily felt a surge of excitement and determination. She knew this was just the beginning. Humanity was about to face the most significant challenge of its existence. But they were ready. They would face the threshold not with fear, but with the strength of everything that made them human. As the clock ticked down, Emily's mind raced with possibilities. The test could be anything. But one thing was certain: humans would rise to meet it in their own way. And when they did, the galaxy would finally understand what they were truly capable of. The beginning of humanity's response. The days after Emily's revelation felt like an unrelenting tide of activity. News about humanity's impending test spread quickly across the globe, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Governments, military forces, scientists, engineers, and thinkers of all kinds were called to contribute to the effort. A sense of urgency and excitement filled the air, but beneath it was a quiet, collective anxiety. No one had ever passed the threshold, and many feared that humanity would suffer the same fate as the countless species before them. Emily's role had shifted. No longer just an observer, she was now at the heart of the strategic response. The summit she attended was held in a secure underground facility, a secret location where the brightest minds from around the world could collaborate without fear of interference. It was here that humanity would come together to formulate their approach to the test. Yet, even in this highly controlled environment, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were still missing something critical. As she walked into the facility on the first day of the summit, the weight of the situation pressed on her shoulders. The room was large, filled with dozens of the world's most brilliant minds. The walls were lined with data screens, showing streams of information from every corner of the planet. She was greeted by Dr. Rachel Thompson, the quantum physicist who had been instrumental in analyzing the alien technology. "Morning, Emily. You ready for this?" Rachel asked, her voice full of quiet resolve. "Ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied, though she wasn't entirely sure what readiness meant anymore. "Have they told us anything new? Any more details about the test?" Rachel shook her head. "Nothing. Still the same cryptic messages. We're on our own here." Emily's gaze swept over the other members of the summit. It was a diverse group, each one an expert in a different field: biologists, engineers, military strategists, philosophers, and artists. The approach was going to have to be multifaceted. The test could be anything. It could involve technology, philosophy, strength, or even something they hadn't even thought of yet. The President of the United States was there as well, pacing at the head of the room, his face grim. He stopped when he saw Emily and Rachel. "Dr. Brooks," Dr. Thompson, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. I'm glad you're both here. We need to get to work. We've only got 30 days. Mr. President, Emily began, looking around the room. We can't approach this test the way others have. Other species failed because they tried to use their strengths, advanced technology, brute force, complex problem solving. But we can't do that. We have to show the Council that we think differently, that we don't operate under the same rules. The President raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we do that? Emily took a deep breath. It's simple. We need to focus on what makes humanity unique, our creativity, our ability to adapt to any situation, and most importantly, our ability to learn from failure. Every species that has failed tried to be something they're not. We're going to prove that we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be ourselves. There was a moment of silence as the room processed her words. Then, one by one, the others began to nod. I agree, said Dr. Rachel Thompson, the scientist in charge of Earth's most advanced research projects. Humanity's adaptability is our greatest asset. We've faced countless challenges throughout history and found ways to overcome them. We'll use that mindset. The room began to buzz with conversation. The leaders of various nations, each one bringing their own expertise to the table, began discussing plans. But the discussions quickly turned into debates, and the debates quickly turned into arguments. Some wanted to invest all resources into developing new technology that could give them an advantage. Others insisted on focusing on military preparation, assuming that the test would involve conflict. Some even argued that humanity should prepare for psychological endurance, assuming that the Council would present a series of mental challenges that would break their spirits. Emily stood up. We're all missing the point, she said, raising her voice just enough to silence the room. This test isn't about who has the biggest army or the best technology. It's about human nature. The aliens have no idea what they're dealing with. Our greatest strength is not in our ability to outsmart them or outfight them. It's in our willingness to embrace the unknown, to take risks and fail. The Council has no idea what kind of species they're up against, and that's why we're going to win. Tom, who had been standing quietly near the door, nodded in agreement. She's right, he added. We've faced challenges that we've destroyed other species. And what do? We laugh. We learn. We try again. That's our greatest weapon. The President sighed. All right, I'm with you. We'll focus on what makes humanity human, but we need to get a move on. This isn't just about philosophy. It's about preparation. I'll leave you all to it. Let's make this happen. The summit continued for hours, but Emily's mind never fully left the larger picture. The conversation in the room was focused on specific plans, new technologies, psychological tactics, even the possibility of creating an entirely new weapon. But Emily knew that none of those things would win the day. If humanity was going to pass the threshold, they would need something more than just ingenuity. They would need heart. That evening, as the summit wrapped up, Emily found herself alone in her room, staring at the digital clock on her desk. The countdown had begun. 30 days. No more time for doubt. No more time for second-guessing. This was it. Humanity's defining moment. And they had to do it their way. She looked out the window at the starry sky. The Council's ships hovered silently, like shadows in the night. They had no idea what was coming. Emily smiled to herself, a deep sense of calm settling over her. Humanity had always been underestimated. But this time, it was different. This time, they would show the galaxy exactly who they were. Let's do this, Emily whispered, her voice full of determination. Let's show them what we're made of. The threshold reveals itself. The next few days passed in a blur. Humanity's leaders, scientists, and strategists worked tirelessly to prepare for the unknown test. Emily Brooks was at the center of it all, her role shifting from advisor to leader. Every day seemed to bring new data, new theories, and new questions. The summit had proven one thing. Humans were capable of immense creativity when put under pressure. But the test was still a mystery. Emily had a feeling it would be something unlike anything humanity had encountered before. No one had passed the threshold, but that didn't mean they couldn't be the first. Each team had a different theory about the test. Some argued that it would require human intelligence to solve a series of impossible mathematical equations. Others believed it would be a psychological test, one designed to challenge humanity's moral compass and decision-making under extreme stress. Still others feared it could be a physical test, a trial of strength, speed, or endurance. Despite all the theories, one thing was clear. Humanity couldn't afford to waste time. They couldn't second-guess themselves or delay. With each passing day, the alien ships loomed closer, watching, waiting, their silent presence reminding everyone of what was at stake. The failure of countless species hung over the world like a dark cloud. Emily and Tom stood in the command center, a large room filled with holographic displays and data streams. Around them, teams of engineers, scientists, and military personnel worked on simulations and prototypes for every possible scenario. Despite all their preparation, the uncertainty still lingered. There was no way to know for sure what would be required of them. "I've been reviewing the data on the previous failures," Tom said, his voice a little strained. The Centurions, the Arcturians, each of them approached the test with certainty, with confidence in their technology or their strength. But none of them realized that the Council was testing something much more fundamental. It's not about how smart or strong you are. It's about how you handle the unexpected. Emily nodded. Exactly. The others failed because they thought they could control the unknown. They used their most powerful assets, technology, logic, and military might. But the test isn't about those things. It's about how a species reacts when faced with something completely unpredictable. The threshold isn't a test of power. It's a test of character. "We've got to embrace the unknown," Tom said, his expression thoughtful. "That's what makes us human." Emily smiled, a mix of exhaustion and determination in her eyes. "We've always embraced the unknown. It's in our nature to explore, to push boundaries, to challenge the status quo. We don't know what the test will be, but we do know one thing. We will face it with everything we have, no matter what happens." Later that evening, Emily was standing outside, gazing up at the alien embassy. The crystalline structure gleamed under the lights of the city, its walls reflecting the stars above. She had spent the last few weeks immersed in the madness of preparation, and for the first time, she allowed herself a moment of peace. "Dr. Brooks," a voice called out from behind her. She turned to see the president approaching, flanked by several military advisors. "Mr. President," Emily said, greeting him with a nod. "I've been thinking about the test. The more I review the failures of other species, the more I'm convinced that we've got to approach it from a completely different angle. We can't fight it, we can't solve it with technology, and we can't predict it. We need to let go of the idea that we can control the outcome." The president raised an eyebrow. "You're saying we need to trust our instincts?" "Yes," Emily said, her voice steady. "We need to trust our adaptability, our creativity. We've always been able to think outside the box, to find solutions that others couldn't see. That's how we've survived all these years. That's our strength, and it's the only way we'll pass this test." The president looked up at the towering embassy, his expression unreadable. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure," Emily replied, her gaze fixed on the gleaming structure. "We can't do it like anyone else. We have to do it our way." Just as she spoke, a low hum vibrated in the air. The sound was coming from the massive alien ships hovering above the city. They were silent, yet there was an undeniable energy in the air, a sense of something being set in motion, something that would soon unfold. It was as though the ships themselves were waiting for the moment to arrive. "We'll start the testing in 3 days, the president said. "The council has informed us that the time has come. We'll need you to be ready." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. 3 days. That was all they had left. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew they couldn't let fear control them. The unknown had always been a part of humanity's journey. It was time to embrace it. The day of the test. When the day finally arrived, Emily stood in front of a large viewing screen, flanked by Tom and the president. The world was watching. Leaders from every corner of the globe had gathered in underground bunkers, observing the test from secure locations. News networks had set up cameras, and millions of people stood by, glued to their screens. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would unfold. The council's representatives, each an alien from a different corner of the galaxy, were present, their forms inscrutable. Emily had never seen them so close, and even though she had spent years studying their psychology, their presence was still unsettling. These were the beings that had ruled space for millennia. They had watched as species rose and fell, and they had never once seen a species pass the threshold. And now, it was humanity's turn. The chamber doors opened, revealing a vast, empty space beyond. The floor was made of some kind of metallic substance that shimmered in the low light. In the center of the room, a single object sat on a pedestal, a strange black cube that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Without any instructions or explanations, Emily, Tom, and the president stepped forward, entering the chamber. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside. There was no turning back. The cube in the center of the room began to glow brighter, and a low hum filled the air. It was unlike anything Emily had ever felt, a deep vibration that seemed to resonate in her chest. As the light from the cube intensified, she realized with a shock that the room was beginning to change. The walls began to shift and warp, distorting into strange, impossible shapes that defied the laws of physics. The cube was not just an object. It was the beginning of the test. "Stay calm," Emily murmured to herself. "We've trained for this." The walls continued to twist, and as they did, images appeared, flashes of alien landscapes, distant stars, and strange creatures from worlds far beyond Earth. For a moment, Emily wondered if the test was a simulation, if they were being thrust into an alien world to navigate its challenges. But then the images grew darker, shifting into horrific scenes from Earth's own past: war, disease, and destruction. Emily clenched her fists. This wasn't just a test of intellect or strength. It was testing their will, their ability to overcome fear, to survive the worst of what humanity had already faced, and still move forward. "Focus," Emily whispered. "We are ready." She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the cube. The moment she touched it, the room seemed to freeze. Time itself appeared to stop as the walls around them solidified, and the strange hum died away. It was as though the cube had acknowledged their presence and was now waiting for their response. Emily's heart raced. This was it, the moment humanity had been waiting for. "The challenge begins." The room remained still. Emily could feel her pulse racing in her throat, her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. The cube before her pulsed faintly with an eerie light, its surface smooth and black, like obsidian. It was as though it was alive, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true nature. But what was this test? And why had it chosen them? Emily had no doubt now. This wasn't a simple puzzle or a straightforward trial of strength. The threshold was something far more complex, something that required more than just intellect or physical endurance. It demanded something deeper, something raw and essential to the very core of humanity. For a moment, Emily's mind raced through a dozen possibilities. Was the cube the key? A weapon? A tool for unlocking another part of the test? Could the room itself be part of the challenge? She tried to push past the fear, trying to think clearly, but it was difficult. The walls continued to shimmer, bending and warping in unnatural ways, as though they were alive. They seemed to ripple with the energy from the cube, each pulse making the room feel smaller, more suffocating. "Stay focused," she whispered to herself, though it did little to calm her nerves. Suddenly, the cube began to hum, a soft vibration that grew louder and more intense. It was as if the cube was sensing their presence, calculating something, waiting for a response. The hum reverberated through her bones, and Emily knew instinctively that it was time. Whatever the test was, it was beginning now. Beside her, Tom shifted nervously. He had been quiet ever since they entered the chamber, and Emily could sense his anxiety. "What do you think it wants?" he asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. Emily looked at him, her eyes narrowed in thought. "I think it's asking us to make a choice. It's testing our decision-making, our ability to confront the unknown without fear. Every step we take from here on out will define how we face the rest of this challenge. We can't hesitate." Tom swallowed, nodding slowly. "You're right. But what happens if we fail? What if it's not just a test of willpower?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Then we'll face whatever comes next. We always have, haven't we?" The walls of the room continued to shift. The glowing cube's light became more pronounced, bathing the chamber in a cold, almost surreal radiance. Emily reached forward, her hand trembling slightly, and touched the cube. The moment her fingers made contact with it, the room erupted into a swirl of colors and sounds, each one more vivid than the last. The walls seemed to dissolve, replaced by images of distant planets, swirling galaxies, and strange alien landscapes. It felt as though they were being pulled into a different reality altogether, a world not governed by the laws of Earth. Suddenly, a sharp, discordant sound broke through the sensory overload, and the images vanished. They were back in the chamber. The walls had stopped moving, the cube now completely still. Emily staggered back, blinking in confusion. What had just happened? Was that part of the test? She turned to Tom, but he was just as bewildered as she was. I don't understand," he muttered. "Did we pass? Did we fail?" Before Emily could respond, the cube pulsed once more, this time with a deeper, more resonant hum. It seemed to vibrate with energy, and in its wake, a new sound began to fill the air. Voices. They were faint at first, barely audible, but soon they grew louder, clearer. Emily couldn't understand the language, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the voice of the council. She realized that the cube wasn't just a tool, it was a communicator, a bridge between humanity and the galactic powers that ruled the cosmos. Humanity, the voice echoed in the chamber, its tone solemn yet filled with curiosity. "You stand at the threshold of your species' fate. What will you choose?" Emily froze. The question hung in the air like a weight. What would they choose? And why was the council asking this now, after everything they had faced? Before she could process the question, the room seemed to shift again, the walls warping once more, but this time they displayed images of Earth's past, wars, famine, violence, and suffering. It was a haunting reminder of the darker parts of humanity's history. But then, the images shifted again, showing the other side. Peace, cooperation, innovation, and moments of triumph. These images were of the best of humanity, of the moments when people came together to solve the impossible, when they rose above their flaws and reached for something better. "These are your choices," the voice continued, "the path you walk as a species. Will you be defined by your failures, your darker impulses, or will you choose the path of progress, of unity, and of cooperation? It is up to you." The weight of the question hit Emily with full force. It was not just a test of intelligence or physical ability, it was a test of humanity's heart. The council had expected a species that would crumble under pressure, a species that would choose division and destruction over unity and growth. But Emily knew the truth. Humanity had always found a way to overcome its darkest moments. Through wars, through loss, through pain, humanity had always found a way to rise again. "Humanity is not defined by its failures," Emily said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "We are defined by our ability to learn from those failures, to rebuild, and to keep moving forward. Our strength lies in our diversity, in our ability to come together even in the face of adversity. The voice from the cube fell silent for a moment, as though contemplating her words. The light from the cube flickered, and then, with a soft, almost imperceptible sound, the image of Earth returned. This time, it was not filled with past failures but with hope, new technologies, thriving communities, and a planet working together to overcome its challenges. Your answer is clear, the Council's voice said. Humanity has chosen. You have chosen to forge your own path, to rise above your flaws, and to unite for the greater good. But your journey does not end here. You must now prove that you can maintain this unity, this progress, in the face of greater challenges to come. The hum from the cube faded, and the chamber began to shift again. This time, it was not just the walls that changed, but the entire environment. The air itself seemed to change, becoming thick with energy. The cube's light dimmed, revealing a series of doors that had not been visible before. Each one was different, but they all led somewhere, toward an unknown future, a future that would be shaped by humanity's choices in this moment. Choose, the voice said again. Which path will you walk? The pressure was unbearable. Emily glanced at Tom, who stood frozen beside her, his face a mixture of awe and fear. The weight of their species' future rested on this decision. It wasn't just a matter of intellect or strength. It was a matter of heart. Would humanity choose a path of division and destruction, as the Council expected, or would they choose a future of cooperation, innovation, and hope? Emily took a deep breath. The Council may have tested humanity's intelligence and adaptability, but it had underestimated the power of human will. She knew the answer. We choose to move forward together, she said firmly. We choose the path of progress. With those words, the doors before them began to open. The future was waiting. The first trial. The doors creaked open, revealing what appeared to be a vast, dark expanse beyond the chamber. Emily, Tom, and the president stepped forward cautiously, each of them fully aware that they had just made a decision that would define their future. The air in the new room was dense with a strange, electric energy, crackling faintly like static. The cube's light had dimmed, leaving the room in near darkness except for the faint glow coming from the far end. There they could make out the silhouette of another structure, this one smaller, but no less imposing. As they moved forward, the air seemed to grow thicker with tension. It felt as if the room itself was alive, watching them, waiting for their next move. The walls around them shimmered with an unnatural glow, as though they were made of liquid light, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. It was as if the entire environment was alive, adapting to their presence, changing in response to their movements. "Stay sharp," Emily whispered, even though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to herself or to the others. "We're just getting started." The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the cube's energy behind them. It was a foreboding silence, the kind that made every sound seem amplified, like a quiet heartbeat echoing in the dark. As they walked deeper into the expanse, the shape at the far end of the room grew clearer. It was another cube, similar to the one they had encountered earlier, but this one was much larger and seemed to pulse with an intensity that matched the oppressive atmosphere of the room. "That's it," Tom muttered. "That's the next part of the test, isn't it?" Emily didn't answer right away. She was studying the structure in front of them, noticing the intricate symbols carved into its surface. Some were recognizable, ancient symbols from Earth's history, but others were alien, completely foreign. The symbols seemed to move on their own, shifting and rearranging, as though they were alive, constantly changing. "What do you think it means?" the president asked, his voice betraying the same unease that Emily felt. "Do we interact with it? Is it a puzzle?" Emily stepped closer, reaching out a hand to touch the smooth surface of the cube. The moment her fingers made contact, a flash of light filled the room, and the cube's surface shifted, forming intricate patterns and geometric shapes. The walls around them seemed to pulse in time with the cube, and the air grew heavier with the strange energy that radiated from it. "Emily," Tom said urgently. "Look." She followed his gaze to the far side of the room, where a new shape had appeared. It was a doorway, shimmering in the darkness, surrounded by the same shifting patterns as the cube. A faint, almost imperceptible sound echoed from within, like whispers or voices, though there was no clear source. Emily hesitated. This was clearly the next step in the test, but she had no idea what lay beyond the doorway. Every instinct told her to proceed with caution, but humanity had always been a species driven by curiosity. They had always sought out the unknown, no matter how dangerous or overwhelming it might be. And this was the ultimate unknown. "We have to go through," Emily said finally, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "There's no turning back now." With a final glance at the glowing cube, she led the way toward the shimmering doorway. The whispers grew louder as they approached, the voices indistinct but undeniably present. The doorway seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and as they passed through it, they were plunged into darkness. The moment they crossed the threshold, the darkness gave way to a blinding light, and Emily's senses were overwhelmed by the sudden shift. She felt herself stumbling forward, disoriented, but the light faded quickly, revealing a new environment. This one was completely different from the chamber they had just left. The walls here were made of organic-looking material, like the insides of a living creature. The floor was soft underfoot, almost sponge-like, and the air smelled faintly of something metallic, like ozone after a storm. The room was circular, with no discernible exit. At the center of the space, a figure stood motionless, bathed in a gentle, glowing light. It was a humanoid shape, but its features were obscured by the intense glow. Emily couldn't make out its form, but she instinctively felt that it was not an enemy. It was waiting for them. Without a word, the figure extended a hand toward them, inviting them to approach. Emily felt her heart race again, her breath shallow as she stepped forward. It was clear now that this was the real test. This was the point where humanity would either fail or succeed. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. The figure did not respond verbally, but instead, the air around it seemed to ripple with energy. The figure's form shifted, becoming clearer, and Emily could see that it was not entirely human, nor was it entirely alien. It seemed to be a hybrid of sorts, a being from a species Emily couldn't comprehend. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an inner light, and its body seemed to be made of shifting, translucent matter. The figure tilted its head, as though considering Emily's question. Then it reached out with a gesture, and the room suddenly filled with visions, scenes of human history, of civilizations rising and falling, of humanity's greatest achievements, and its most horrific failures. There were flashes of war, destruction, and death, but also moments of beauty, unity, and discovery. The figure seemed to be showing them a reflection of their species, its potential for both greatness and destruction. Emily could feel the weight of the visions pressing down on her. It was as if the very essence of humanity was being laid bare before her, and she had to confront the truth of who they were. The vision slowed, and she saw images of her own life, of her struggles, her triumphs, her mistakes. It was as if the test was asking her to question everything. What had humanity become? What could they still become? The figure's hand dropped, and the visions disappeared. The room was silent once more. "Choose," the figure's voice echoed in Emily's mind, deep and resonant. "Will you remain bound by your past, or will you break free and shape a new future?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary test. The figure was asking them to confront the very soul of humanity, to face the darkest and most beautiful parts of their history. It was asking them if they were ready to move forward, to shape a future that was not dictated by the failures of the past, but inspired by the potential of the future. She glanced at Tom, who stood beside her, his face etched with a mixture of awe and fear. The president, too, was staring at the figure, his face tense with the weight of the decision that lay before them. "We choose to break free Emily said finally, her voice filled with resolve. We choose to shape our future, no matter what it takes. The figure's form shimmered, its light dimming for a moment as if in recognition of their answer. Then the room seemed to shift once more, the walls of the chamber transforming into a vast landscape, one that stretched out infinitely before them. This was not just a test of intelligence or strength. This was a test of humanity's ability to rise above its past, to shape a new path forward. The figure spoke once more, its voice carrying the weight of ages. Your journey has just begun. The test is far from over. And with that, the ground beneath them began to shift, pulling them forward into the next stage of the trial. The path was still unclear, but one thing was certain. Humanity had proven something vital. They had passed the first trial, but now they would need every ounce of strength, creativity, and resilience to face whatever came next. The path ahead. The ground beneath them shifted again, the movement subtle but undeniably real. Emily could feel the atmosphere in the chamber change. The air was charged, full of anticipation. As the figure slowly faded into the light, the room around them transformed into an entirely new landscape. They were no longer in a room at all. The space around them stretched into a boundless alien wilderness, a vast expanse, rich with color, pulsing with life in a way that felt almost alive. Emily blinked, trying to comprehend the enormity of what lay before them. The sky was a vivid shade of violet, the landscape dotted with towering crystalline formations that glowed like stars. Strange, bioluminescent plants stretched toward the horizon, their colors shifting as if they were responding to the air itself. The ground beneath their feet was soft and pliable, like walking on thick moss, but it hummed with energy. There was no doubt about it. They were in an alien world. It felt ancient, and yet strangely familiar. Where are we? Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not sure, Emily responded, her voice tinged with awe. But I don't think it matters. The test isn't about where we are. It's about what we do here. The president, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward, looking out across the landscape. So this is it then, he said. This is the next stage of the test. Emily nodded slowly. She felt the weight of their decision pressing on her, the choice they had made to break free from their past, to look forward with hope. I think the figure's right. We've chosen to shape a new future. But the real test, the one that matters, is what we do with that choice. We're not just being tested on what we've overcome. We're being tested on who we choose to become. As the words left her mouth, the landscape before them began to change again. The sky shimmered and split into layers, revealing a series of pathways, each one leading in a different direction. The ground itself seemed to ripple, and the pathways stretched out in all directions, each one bending and twisting through the alien terrain, as if guiding them toward an unknown destination. One of the paths stood out. It wasn't necessarily the clearest, nor the easiest. In fact, it was the most treacherous, weaving through thick, untamed forests and over jagged cliffs. But there was something about it that called to Emily. A strange pull, a feeling that this was the path they had to take. Without saying a word, she began to move toward it, her determination as sharp as a blade. Tom followed closely behind, his footsteps sure. I don't know why, but I feel it too, he said, his voice low but filled with the same resolve. This is the path we have to take. It's the one that will lead us forward. The president, who had been pacing nervously, looked at Emily and Tom, then glanced back at the other paths. Are you sure? This path seems dangerous. We don't have a choice, Emily said, turning to face him. The other paths are safer, but they're not the ones that will change us. We have to face the danger, the uncertainty, because that's how we move forward. That's how we prove to the council, and to ourselves, that we can handle whatever comes next. The president seemed to think about it for a moment, then nodded. All right, we're with you. With the decision made, the trio ventured down the treacherous path. The air grew thicker as they entered the dense forest, the bioluminescent plants casting eerie, shifting shadows across the ground. The trees here were unlike anything on Earth, towering, twisting spires of light and shadow, their roots visible above the surface, curling and twisting around each other in a chaotic dance. The path was narrow, and every step felt precarious as they navigated the uneven terrain. Every now and then, they would hear strange noises, alien sounds that echoed in the distance, distant howls and growls that made Emily's skin crawl. She kept moving, though, her eyes focused on the horizon ahead. There was no time for fear. They had made their choice. They had chosen the path of uncertainty, the path of growth. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the terrain became more difficult. The ground became more uneven, the trees closer together, their branches weaving in and out of the path, creating an almost impenetrable canopy. But still, they pressed on. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time was difficult to measure in this strange, ever-shifting landscape. The trio was exhausted, their energy waning, but their resolve remained as strong as ever. They had come too far to turn back. Then they came to a clearing. The path had led them to an ancient stone bridge, its surface cracked and weathered with age, but it stood strong nonetheless. The bridge spanned a deep chasm, its far end obscured by swirling mist. There was no sign of where it led, but Emily knew instinctively that they had to cross it. "We're almost there," Emily said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We're getting closer." The president stepped forward cautiously, looking down at the chasm below. "It's so vast," he said, his voice filled with awe. "How do we know what's on the other side?" "We don't," Emily answered, "but we'll find out when we get there." Without another word, Emily stepped onto the bridge. The stone felt solid beneath her feet, but the bridge swayed gently in the wind, the chasm below seeming to stretch on forever. As she crossed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The very air around them seemed to hum with energy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to cross. Tom followed closely behind, the president at his heels. The mist at the far end of the bridge began to swirl more intensely, and the air grew colder. Emily's heart raced. Whatever awaited them on the other side of the bridge would not be simple, but they had come this far. They couldn't afford to hesitate now. The moment they reached the center of the bridge, the world around them seemed to shift again. The sky above darkened, the mist swirling around them in thick, impenetrable clouds. A loud, booming sound echoed across the landscape, as if the very fabric of reality was tearing itself apart. The bridge trembled beneath their feet, the stones shaking as the air seemed to vibrate with a strange energy. "What's happening?" Tom shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "I don't know," Emily replied, her eyes darting around. "Just stay focused. We're almost there." Then, just as quickly as it had started, the trembling stopped. The mist parted, revealing a vast, open plain on the other side of the chasm. The bridge had led them to a new world, one that was both familiar and foreign at the same time. The sky was clear here, the landscape bathed in golden light. In the distance, a towering structure loomed. An ancient city, its architecture both alien and human in design, standing as a testament to both the past and the future. "This is it," Emily said, her voice steady. "This is where we prove ourselves. This is where humanity's future begins." The trio stood at the edge of the bridge, looking out over the city that lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Emily felt a sense of peace. They had chosen the path of uncertainty, and it had led them here, to the next stage of their trial, to a future they would shape with their own hands. But what lay ahead in the city was unknown. The next phase of the test awaited them, and whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together.